Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Rise of Kyoshi chapter analysis video. This one is going to be for chapter 16, which is called The Agreement. Basic gist of this chapter is basically Rangi starts to give Kyoshi some firebending lessons, and this obviously prompts actually forming an agreement with the rest of the Dao Fei that they have here, the Flying Opera Company, creating a deal with them for them to train her in the other elements as well. And that's pretty much it, and they just settle on eventually they are going to train her, but first they have to, perform a score here. They have to actually do something as a Dao Fei group to get back on track, so they have money to sort of just fund the next kind of couple of weeks and stuff like that. So let's get into it. So yeah, we immediately jump in. Rangi wakes Kyoshi up, wants to get started immediately on the firebending training, and yeah, she immediately reveals herself to be a little bit of a strict teacher here, mainly getting across the idea that she's sort of paying Kyoshi back with the tough training here, the tough teaching, for all of the sudden reveals about Kyoshi's past here. So she's taking a little bit of enjoyment about, forcing Kyoshi to hold a position for like 10 minutes, because from Rangi's point of view, she's just told her, wait, I'm actually the Avatar. My parents are Dao Fei, and oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, my mother was an airbender. So all those things are Rangi sort of paying her back here with this. As far as the firebender training goes, it just gets across the idea that, immediately, Kyoshi doesn't seem to have a problem necessarily firebending, but she's not exactly the, most natural bender. It's not like first lesson with Rangi, immediately she's firebending, in that here, kind of like Aang with Zhang, she wants to get immediately started on the producing a fire, but Rangi wants her to slow down. And in the middle of all of this, they do have some talk about things. So Rangi, at the moment, is still dealing with the idea of, your mother was an airbender, your mother was Dao Fei, an airbender was Dao Fei. How is that even possible? And Kyoshi's just like, I didn't think it was relevant. And Rangi says, it is relevant. Air Nomads aren't outlaws. This is like finding out you had a second head under your robes the whole while. And this is where Kyoshi reveals what she knows about her mother and her history. My mother was a nun born in the Eastern Air Temple. I don't know much about her early life other than that she became a master at a young age and was highly regarded. Then, on a journey to the Earth Kingdom, she met my father in a small town somewhere. He was the Dao Fei, an earthbender and a small-time thief. Rangi says, oh, I can already tell where this is going. Yes, he dragged her into a scheme and she fell in love with both him and the life of an outlaw. She must have been born into the wrong existence as an air nomad, because she tattooed over her arrows with serpents and dove into the underworld with her whole being, seeking out more adventure. So I think that's nice to know. We don't get to learn too much about Kyoshi's father. I think this chapter actually is one of the only ones that Hark gets any sort of mention. So we get confirmed he is an earthbender, so that's brought up here. He was the small-time thief, the Dao Fei, so basically her joining in is what sort of brought him into the spotlight, and together that's what founded the Founding Opera Company, and they got a certain level of infamy after that. So that's pretty interesting. And then yeah, it is a notable thing to see any airbender character move away from the classic kind of they are a monk or a nun kind of existence. A lot of the airbender characters can be very similar, just because of how much their culture plays a role in their life and stuff like that. So it's always interesting to get a different take on an air nomad character. And so Kyoshi's mother represents that. Someone who was a master airbender, had the tattoos from a young age, and just, fell in love with someone who was an outlaw and grew to like that life. And it isn't interesting when they don't go into it too much about the specifics of how it happened, but an air nomad is a nomad in a way. I suppose being a Dao Fei is sort of also a nomadic life. So you can sort of see how if Kyoshi's mother maybe was upset about some of the air nomad rules, but likes the nomad life, that becoming a Dao Fei kind of allows her to express herself all the more, while not having to be so so focused on, you know, maintaining all of the specific things that are inherent to Air Nomad culture. She became a relatively big figure among Dao Fei, more so than my father, but her airbending suffered from a spiritual taint, and so her journal says. Her powers dwindled, and she compensated, and that explains the fans. So we know that that's one of the things. Like when Aang uses it, he's actually really powerful using those fans, even though he doesn't seem to, you know, notice it too much or care about it that much. But yeah, fans are perfect for enhancing airbending, and yeah, just the idea of a spiritual taint. I think the best way to explain this is that we've seen something similar to this before with firebending. The reason Zuko struggles when he first joins the group to firebend, and then, you know, especially when he starts to teach Aang, he has to learn to find a new source for his inner fire. When it changes his initial, you know, typical, you know, firebending is power attitude that he's had the whole time with his desire to capture Aang, when that changes, he's suddenly a very weak firebender. He can barely produce a flame. And he has to go find out the true way of firebending and suddenly realize what his actual desire is, what the true meaning of firebending is, and that allows him to get back on track. So here's sort of the airbending version of that. It's an inherently spiritual ability. So someone going down the outlaw life, the effect that has, it actually weakens her airbending. She goes from being prodigal master airbenders to having to keep up that level by using fans for everything. So that's an interesting thing. I like that little mention of a spiritual taint there of her airbending abilities. It's a nice reference. But yeah, it's also mentioned here that why do you think I never told Kelsang? And that's an interesting one because of the age of Kyoshi and stuff like that. That means that, like, theoretically, Kelsang could have known Kyoshi's mother, given the way, like, the ages work out and stuff like that. They'd be, like, it's hard to tell in terms of, like, we don't think we get much of an age on, like, Kyoshi's mother and stuff like that, but, like, I assume Kelsang would probably be older, but not that much older than them, while they, like, were alive at the same time. So that is an interesting one. She purposely kept her from him, and it gives extra context to, in a way, why she's so she adapted, I suppose, so easily to sort of being raised by Kelsang, because she was used to being raised by an Air Nomad, but here's an actual Air Nomad, and she realized early on she had to keep that from him, and it's just very, very interesting overall. And the idea with Rangi here is just that she's really struggling with these idea of her, like, preconceptions of the world, these hard set rules being broken here all at once. Like, this, Yoon is the Avatar, Kyoshi's actually the Avatar. The Avatar's meant to do things this way, but we can't do it that way. We have to do it a different way, and we have to go underground. And now, here is suddenly an Air Nomad who is an outlaw, and it's so difficult for Rangi to accept all of this, because she's very, you know, devoted to the way things are, set in her ways, and doesn't want things to change. And then we get a little kind of joke between the two of them that gets a bit serious, you know. Promise me you won't throw your life away over a boy. And Kyoshi says, I won't, besides who could possibly be worth? And at that point they both remember Yoon. They both sort of realize that they'd, like, temporarily forgotten him. And that, you know, it gets very, very serious for a moment. They get back on track with the firebending test. Rangi again is slowing her down, telling her just focus on, like, the breathing and containing your power. But Kyoshi immediately wants to try it. She tries and basically just creates a big puff of smoke. So the idea is that she's at least producing something. It's not a full block or something like that. But, you know, she's going to have to do more training to eventually do firebending. But as we'll find out, firebending isn't going to be a problem for her as such. But we'll get to that. So, there's a few, like, close calls here, and that someone comes in like, wait, who was firebending just there? And obviously Kyoshi produced the smoke, but Rangi has to cover for her and be like, yeah, that was me, I just lost concentration for a second. Don't know what's going on there. They get to talking with everyone the next time over eating, and it's revealed that they're actually just eating, like, rats here, and, like, they're like, wait, I'm surprised you're dealing with like eating kind of lower quality food like this. And Rangi's just like, yeah, survival training at the academy. You do what you can. And then Kyoshi's just like, yeah, I had to eat garbage before. And everyone's like, what? And this is where I suppose the full scope of just like, they thought Jason and Hark just left Kyoshi with someone and she lived a okay life all considering, but here she reveals to everyone that like, no, like she was an outcast. Like, you know what the Earth Kingdom was like. They only care about blood relations, and I was an outcast, and I had to do what I had to do to survive. And this brings up some of the reasons why they sort of hate people who like abide by the law and so on. And you know, they just ask her, you know, you must have hated their guts, the villagers. And he says, no, not really. She says, no, not really. As much as not as much as I hate the people who left me with them. And this is where Lek runs off. And again, like, we've already had the setup for this, and I think it is a really well done dynamic of Kyoshi and Lek and how their issues with each other basically relate to their own opinions on Kyoshi's parents. Kyoshi hates her own parents because they abandoned her, and then with regards to Lek, she suddenly found out that when they abandoned her, they kind of helped to raise him, so there's jealousy on that side. Now, Kyoshi's sort of come into Lek's life and is revealing that, like, these people you looked up to and they saved you from everything, they abandoned their own daughter, and he has to accept that, you know, these people who are so important to him weren't perfect, and how are Kyoshi and Lek going to sort of come together and be allies when they disagree so heavily over this really emotional topic. And we get that brought up here of just like, you know, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll remember to be nicer to the boy my mother and father decided to raise instead of me. And they're all like, oh, wow, this is a tough issue here. They ask Rangi about like her past and stuff like that. What's a young noble like you doing with an earth peasant? And she just says, I'm honor bound to follow and protect Kyoshi. Interesting line from Kirima here. Gonna cut you off right there. The last time I listened to a firebender talk about honor, my ears nearly rotted off my skull. Had to kick him out of my bed with both feet. So, you know, people just, I saw a few people before the book came out, like, just mention this line in terms of just, if you're worrying about, like, the tone or maturity level of this book, there's a line right there that you would never get in the show. You'd probably never get that in one of the comics either. What they're throwing it in right there, just, you know, Kirima kicking a firebender out of her bed. So that's a fun line. Then they talk about, you know, the training, like, okay, you know, I still want the training even though we don't have the full network. They ask her, who do you want revenge against? She refuses to tell them. She wants to learn the dust stepping technique, and there's a little bit of a back and forth about that. It's like, it's our signature technique. It'll be a tough, you know, deal to get that going. And Rangi's just like, I learned how to do it with firebending after seeing you guys do it once. And they're like, yeah, and you're lucky we let you away with that. So it's just, the group has all these kind of rules and stuff like that, but they don't really follow them as closely as you'd think. So Kirima basically steps up at this point and basically says, okay, we'll teach you, but in return for that, you have to swear to our oaths and follow our codes. You have to basically become a Dao Fei. So she's going to have to recite the codes, follow the oaths, and that's going to have to be it. And there's a setup here of just the idea of, like, Rangi does not want Kyoshi to do this. She doesn't want Kyoshi to sort of sully her honor by basically becoming a Dao Fei. The avatar in her mind can't become a Dao Fei. She's already had all these previous things shattered. This can happen too. And the other members of the group are kind of like that as well, of just like, are you willing, even though you're looking down on us this whole time, the way you feel about Dao Fei, to just have this, take this hit to your honor? And Kyoshi just says, like, to herself, not to anyone else, yes, as far as she was concerned, her personal honor and reputation had no value. Trading them for more power was an easy choice. And she's just like, what are the oaths? So next page is basically, we see Kyoshi doing this. They talk about how there are actually like 54 oaths, but they'll shorten it down to just 3 for Kyoshi here to make things easier. So the first one here is, Kyoshi says, I will swear to defend my brothers and sisters and obey the commands of my elders. Their kin will be my kin, their blood will be my blood. Should I fail to uphold this vow, may I be hacked to death by many knives. Second one is, I swear to follow no ruler and beholden to no law. Should I become the lackey of any crown or country, may I be ripped apart by thunderbolts. Final one is, last, I swear to never make an honest living from those who abide the law. I will take no legitimate wage and work for no legitimate man. Should I ever accept coin for my labours, may I be sliced to bits by a variety of knives. So they're interesting vows in that there's obviously the whole kind of bandit sort of outlaw aspect to them at the end, but there's a certain level of honor to them as well. With regards to the Earth Kingdom, pretty much is revealed to, it is the truth that it is not a particularly well-run place. So the idea of them not really abiding by, the law as set forth by like the Earth Kingdom and stuff like that, it's kind of like, you get it because of how badly run the place is. You get the idea of them defending, I suppose both your blood relatives, but also your Dao Fei relatives as well. And then the idea of like following no ruler, only being, loyal effectively to the people that are part of your Dao Fei group. And it's interesting in that you can sort of apply some of these to, I suppose, Kyoshi's ideals as like a fully realized avatar with regards to like how she deals with the Earth King and the peasant uprising, and how she doesn't really seem to have a lot of respect for the Earth King. And that's going to be an interesting one, I suppose, going into like the second book, if she ever has to interact with the Earth King, what her reaction is to dealing with him at maybe an earlier point before that, and so on. But they're interesting for sure. Rangi again continues to show her kind of like, I'm not particularly happy about this, but I suppose she's willing to sort of accept it to get the training that she needs. In the aftermath of this, she wants the training to start immediately, but they're like, no, we have to pick up a score first. Everyone else says they're going to go head for basically they're going to head for like a Dao Fei village near Ba Sing Se, like the outskirts of the mountains around Ba Sing Se. That's where they're heading next to get this score. But before that happens, Wong basically reveals that he can teach Kyoshi how to use the fans properly. So he takes them out, performs basically like a theater routine that doubles as like a fighting technique as well. And Kyoshi is very, very impressed by this. And they all sort of demonstrate just how skilled they are, just with like acrobatics and gymnastics and stuff like that, that there really is this sort of theatrical element to them. There's a reason they're called the Flying Opera Company, in that like we see just how agile they all are, and that's exactly the thing that Kyoshi doesn't have in terms of her own skill set, is that she is not particularly agile, you'd say, or no delicacy in any of her movements. It is explained that the reason they have these sort of techniques is that this side of things comes from Hark. We have a lineage through your father's side that traces back to one of the royal theatre schools in Ba Sing Se, and we stay sharp enough at performing to have a plausible cover in the cities we visit. So that's a pretty cool thing of just like, it's a gang basically going into a city. They can always cover as just, oh yeah, the Flying Opera Company is a theater group and they can do these kind of things. So that's very, very interesting. That explains stuff like the makeup that was sort of touched upon later on. And obviously we haven't seen it in full just yet. I think she mentioned in one of her nightmares her father wearing the makeup, but we haven't seen this exact style of makeup just yet. But you see where it's coming from, sort of theater makeup. So Wong agrees to teach her the fan in exchange for a fifth of her shares for any future jobs that they do. And yeah, that's basically it. Lek comes back after storming off, and they reveal, yeah, she's like one of our sisters now. She's taken the code, and he's like, what? No, she's an abider. And you see just the frustration on his part, because she's disrespectful towards her own parents, which are the people who raised him, and that whole thing comes up again. He's basically saying, I'm never calling you kin, but we'll see how their relationship actually goes about developing. And yeah, pretty much after this is when they are going to go, they get on Peng Peng, and that they are going to, go to this Dao Fei village, basically. Other things here are basically just, it's at this point they ask the question, where did you guys get this bison from? And they lie and say that they stole it from an Air Nomad, not wanting to reveal the full story just yet. And this is another thing that makes them sort of question the honor of like Kyoshi and Rangi, and just like separating a monk from their bison. That's cold. though I should have expected such low behavior from someone who doesn't respect their mother and father. And they note that just Lao Ji doesn't seem to be around at this point. But yeah, that's the chapter. It's interesting in that it just continues on the reaction to the reveal of like Kyoshi's mother was an airbender, the start of Kyoshi's firebending training, and then mainly just Kyoshi, to get what she wants, being willing to accept becoming a Dao Fei now, that her hatred for Jianzhu goes far beyond her hatred for her parents, and I suppose from her perspective, their lives as Dao Fei causing what happened to her to happen, and that she's willing to accept that for the training that she needs right now. And as we'll see, she is growing sort of fond of these people as well. She's not just here to use them. She is sort of growing slowly to appreciate them as, you know, friends, and I suppose really sort of abide by these Dao Fei codes as well. So that's one thing. And then the continued sort of, I wouldn't say like issues, but like, you know, concerns from Rangi towards Kyoshi's behavior, that she's just making these immediate decisions that she's not fully, I suppose, thinking about how they will reflect on other people or herself, that, you know, she's not really thinking about, oh, the avatar can't become a Dao Fei. She's just like, no, I need the training, so I'll do whatever I can to get it, and is fine with anything that happens to get there. So lots of nice setup continuing as we go on. But yeah, over the next couple of chapters, we're going to really see the dynamic between the group sort of come together with the newly reformed Flying Opera Company. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this chapter, the agreement. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.